you're anywhere between 0 and 2000 elo in chess, you're very lucky. Why? Because you can win pretty much every single one of your chess games just by not making any major mistakes. In this video I'm gonna share with you the calculated method that you must use to avoid 99% of all of the chess mistakes you're making. I'm gonna play a game from start to finish and show you how to do it in practice. What's up, chess player, and welcome to the Journey to Grandmaster, the place where you can improve every single aspect of your chess game. Today we play against Charles. Charles is a 2000 rated elo bot on chess.com, and yes, I know those bots play really not that strong as they're supposed to, but that's a question to chess.com. Anyway, it would be very instructive to see what kind of challenges we are gonna get in this game, how you should address them and take advantage of your opponent's mistakes. I'm going to start with the move d4 because in the very beginning of the game you always want to focus on the center. In the opening there are three important things you must always focus on. The center, which I'm doing right here, the development of your pieces. You have to religiously focus on that, developing every single one of your pieces as fast as possible. The golden principle to achieve that is one piece, one move. So that's why I'm playing knight to f3, and I'm not gonna move my knight for the second time before I develop every single one of my other pieces. e6. At least I'm gonna try to do that. Maybe I'm gonna fail with that. And third, you have to bring your king into the safety. This is the golden principle about the opening, because before you go all in into the attack and try to destroy your opponent, you want to make sure that your king is safe. Like your child, you have to care about it, make sure that there is nothing dangerous that can happen to it. Okay, I'm gonna play c4 because I want to fight for the center. My opponent plays the move c6 here, creating this triangle. By the way, very solid system for black, but we don't really care. We make knight c3 because we know he is lower than 2000 rated opponent, so at some point he's gonna start making mistakes. We just need to do our stuff, focus on what is important for us. And don't try to outplay your opponent from the very beginning. It's not necessary. Just focus on what's right, and then he's gonna do his worst to give you some opportunities to take advantage of his mistakes and win the game. Okay, he takes here on c4. Well, we also, at the same time, should never underestimate our opponent, because maybe he has some ideas that we need to address, otherwise we might get into trouble. So he just grabbed a pawn. This is quite a serious thing, and he wants to protect it with a move b5, and then that would be a very solid pawn structure. So we want to stop it. How can we stop the move b5? Well, we do it by playing the move a4. Whenever our opponent makes a move, we think what he wants to achieve with it, what is the idea, then we pose a question whether it's dangerous for us, and if it is, like in this case b5 is pretty annoying. So the next question is how can we stop it, and then we consider our options and find the move a4. Our opponent plays the move bishop b4, which is actually quite a smart idea, and this is a well-known theoretical line. Black is pinning this knight so that b5 is possible again. Notice that right now we had, before this move bishop to b4, two attackers, and he only had one defender. But right now the knight is not really taking part anymore, so b5 is possible again. Well, we still play the move e3 because we want to continue our development no matter what, and this move opens up this bishop and we attack this pawn on c4. Now the right way for black to continue is to play b5, and that is exactly what our opponent is doing. So I have to say that 2000 rated bot on chess.com is playing much stronger, at least so far, than everything we had previously. So let's see. Now we need to once again create a thread, at the same time continue our development. So in the best case scenario, it's always a multi-purpose move so that we develop our pieces and at the same time create a threat for our opponent. Okay, bishop d2, now a takes b. Once again have two attackers there. Yeah, a5, still a theoretical line. Now we have to take because we have to be active. We have to create some difficulties for our opponent, and if he just takes back on b5, then we can take it with the knight. So he has to take with the bishop. But then we get another type of advantage. We get a pair of bishops, which is always great, especially if we have a way to open up the position. On the other side, our opponent has an extra pawn here, and that is something very important. Maybe I shouldn't have made it so fancy and made the move e3 earlier, just to make sure, okay, that is never possible. If he takes, we take back. But okay, we got ourselves in this complicated position. Normally, you can never completely avoid complicated stuff in chess, right? Your opponent can do something crazy, and then, well, you have to deal with it. Notice that our opponent actually has violated those development principles we have talked earlier. He hasn't developed any pieces yet. I mean, this is so crazy. He only plays with his pawns now that he exchanges his only active piece, the bishop on b4. By the way, notice that we have made a second move with the piece that we already have developed, but we did it for a very good reason. We needed to capture the bishop back. So, of course, there are exceptions. It's not like you have moved this knight once here, and if your opponent plays queen to g5, you are saying, I don't care that it's a free queen, I'm not gonna move my knight for the second time. No, of course, you should be reasonable. You should always think in terms of the most active opportunities for yourself. But what I mean is never voluntarily make a second move with the same piece without a very, very good reason to do that. Okay, so what do we do next? We need to once again create any threats. So that is the move b3 here, because we attack this pawn on c4, and we do it twice. We want also to develop our bishop there, and our opponent plays here the move b4. That is actually the wrong move. Why? Because before doing that, he hasn't calculated the variations, and that is something I recommend you always do. If you want to get to this 2000 elo level in chess, you never make a move without thinking what your opponent can do. And the simplest thing you can do before you move any piece that you have, try to think whether this pawn or piece can be taken by your opponent. So in this case, b4 would be a great move. I mean, it's attacking the bishop. If you have to go back, then he plays c3, and basically black is winning. But it's not that simple. Always try to find the best move for your opponent, not the one that you like him to make. In this case, and how to do that? Well, you always start with the most active opportunities, which are checks, captures, and threats. And you use this system both for you and for your opponent. In this case, you have to consider what happened to this pawn if you just take it. Can our opponent take it back? Well, not really, because we have this rook here, and so the pawn on a5 is pinned. That means we can just capture this pawn. Of course, we check whether our opponent has any other opportunities, but not really, because he hasn't developed any pieces, and he still continues to play only with the pawns. Okay, queen to b6. Yeah, that is actually a threat, and he attacks the bishop and the pawn behind that. Well, we didn't have any choice. Anyway, we couldn't afford ourselves to go back, and we have won a pawn. Maybe he's gonna win this b3 pawn, but still we get the development advantage. That cannot be bad for us. Now we have to decide what to do next, because our bishop is really under attack. So we first think, what is our opponent's idea? Queen to b6, attacking the bishop. What do we do? Well, the bishop has to go somewhere, or we can defend it, or we can create an counter threat. So maybe we can attack, I don't know, something very important, this g7 pawn with our queen. Fortunately not possible, but at some point it is a very, very cool technique. If your opponent creates a threat, you create a counter threat, and then this bishop is not that important because you want to give a checkmate or something like that. Unfortunately, in this case, it's not really possible, so I guess the best thing we can do is to move our bishop. The question is, what would be the best move for our bishop to go? First of all, of course, captures, but bishop takes a5 is not really possible. We don't have enough defenders for that. We actually can play that move queen to d2. That would protect the bishop, and our opponent cannot really do anything about it, but I don't really like it. Knight c6, then the bishop is hanging once again. What have we achieved? Really nothing. And also we are kind of making a fancy move. Normal move would be the bishop is in trouble, let's move it to a good position. I like the move bishop c5 as the most active move, and a move with a tempo, so our opponent doesn't really have a choice. He has to do something about the queen, probably just take the queen on the pawn on b3 with the queen. That's exactly what he's doing. And now we are still a pawn down, so it's not such a simple thing. But I don't want to exchange the queens, because that would make life simpler. We have an advantage in terms of pieces development, and our opponent has a material advantage. If that's the case, we don't want to exchange the queens, because that reduces our attacking potential. So I like the move queen to c1 here, because it's a multi-purpose move again. First, we avoid the queen's trade. Second, we cover another threat that our opponent has, namely queen to c3 check. And third, we create a threat of our own. We attack the c4 pawn. By the way, we attack it twice with the bishop and the queen. So let's do that. Now it's time for our opponent to finally start developing some pieces. Yeah, he does that, bishop a6. By the way, it also protects the pawn on c4, so we cannot take it. This is always like the first thing you should think whenever you see a move. Just forget about all of your ideas and moves and dreams for a second and think what your opponent wants with his move. Okay, but this bishop is actually blocking the rook. So the second thing you should think, maybe this move changes something else in the position. In this case, the connection between the rook and the a5 pawn, and we can actually take advantage of that and just take the pawn on a5. I don't see anything wrong with that. Maybe our opponent wants to play c3, and then, yeah, somehow, if we exchange the pieces, this pawn becoming very, very dangerous. So another move we have is knight to d2, just attacking this queen and this pawn on c4 for the third time, and then maybe afterwards we take on c4 or on a5. And we even have another move, rook to b1, which is attacking the queen. Maybe the queen has no moves, but actually it has quite a good square on a4, and then our rook is not that active anymore. So I don't like that, but I do like knight d2. Once again, that would be a second move with the same piece, but for a very good reason, for a double attack and getting rid of this queen, which is very, very annoying. And stopping that c3 idea. If the queen goes to b5, then we can take with the bishop and attack the queen again, and then take the a5 pawn. If the queen goes all the way back to a7, then maybe we can take here on a5 first, and then take on c4, and therefore win a pawn. I really like that plan. So knight to d2. Sometimes we break those principles. So first we learn the principles, like one piece, one move, and then, which is more difficult, we learn how to break it. We only do it in this case. By the way, it's not necessarily that knight d2 is such a great move. Now that I notice the queen is very active on b7, it's attacking the g2 pawn, so that bishop c4 has some drawbacks. But first we can just take this pawn on a5. The material is equal, and that is already very good. We also have a much better piece development, so basically there is nothing bad going on here. But this g2 pawn is quite a big concern. I really don't want to allow our opponent's queen to grab it. Now our opponent plays knight to d7, and that attacks our bishop. It's not a big concern because the bishop is protected twice, but I don't really want to allow that exchange, to be honest, because the bishop is controlling this diagonal, not allowing this king to be castled, at least for the time being. So I would prefer, well, I have to start with the most active opportunities first. I have this move knight takes c4. Like bishop c4 is not the only way to capture. Remember, checks, captures, and threats. And so knight c4 is a capture here, at the same time creating a huge threat. So it's a multi-purpose move. Knight d6 basically wins a queen. It takes here, we can take the rook. We don't want to blunder our rook. Queen takes back. And also rook takes a8 is a check. It's the first move we have to calculate. And then maybe not to lose this pawn on g2, we can take with the queen on c4. In this case, we are going to have an extra pawn. But we kind of, well, actually that's quite a big problem. We make our back rank very, very vulnerable, and queen a1 is a move, and then our king is in trouble. I don't really want to do that. So that is how you calculate the variations. You don't just finish it too early, because that might get you to trouble. Maybe your opponent has something dangerous afterward. Okay, knight takes c4, bishop takes, rook takes a8, queen takes a8, bishop takes c4. Now he can take here on g2. Maybe it's not such a big problem if you just play rook f1 for now, and then, yeah, he can play knight f6. Everything is more or less solid for him. Not like I'm a big fan of it. I can just play the move f3, just blocking this diagonal and preparing the move knight c4, but then he takes here. We can take it back, knight f6, and he's going to be in time to castle. Then, if I don't have anything direct, I really want to save the bishop. So I'm gonna play bishop a3. Yes, it's a move back. Yes, I'm spending yet another move with the same piece, but I do it once again for a very good reason. I want to preserve this bishop so that even if He plays now knight f6, he cannot steal castle, and I really want to make sure that his king is in the center. It gives me a huge advantage. Now, once again, I can play knight takes c4, but I have to calculate the variations. Bishop takes, the rook is hanging, so rook a8, queen takes, and now this bishop and a3 is hanging. He can take it. I play queen to c8, king to e7, and I can grab the rook. But my king is in huge trouble, and I really don't want to get into that. That would be not a nice thing for my king to happen. Remember about the third very important principle in Dominant, make sure your king is in safety. Well, we don't achieve that. We have actually the move bishop e2, just developing our bishop, and now after queen takes g2 we have a tactical solution to the problem. We have the move bishop to f3, we protect our rook, we attack this queen on g2, and we attack this rook on a8, so that would be just completely winning for us. Otherwise we are ready to castle, and next move maybe take on c4. What kind of opportunities our opponent has? Well, he actually can play the move c3. That is pretty annoying because he's attacking my bishop and my knight on d2 with a check. What can we do about that? Well, we can just play knight f3, of course, but then bishop takes, we have to take with the king, and our rook is hanging. That is actually not that simple. So we got ourselves this fancy position that I didn't really want to get, but now we have to deal with it. If we just play f3 like I initially wanted, c3, now maybe we can just take with the queen. By the way, after bishop e2, c3, we can also take with the queen. Bishop takes e2, now our rook is actually protected. Or we can just take with the check first, queen takes, and king takes e2. We have an extra pawn there. Our king is relatively secure because, well, queen a6 is the only check, but then we have queen d3. Remember, we have a pawn up. We can afford ourselves that. Yeah, I quite like it, because bishop e2 is continuing the development. It's following the principles that I'm trying to teach here. So I should do that. Yeah, he plays c3, which is a very nice idea. Now we cannot play bishop takes a6, we cannot play bishop f3, because our opponent has created a devastating threat to grab our knight with a check. And please remember, before you move any single one of your pieces, try to understand what your opponent can do, and not only assume that, okay, I take this bishop, he has to take back. No, forget about that. Start with checks first. In most of the cases, if you're going to blunder something, it's going to be connected either to a check or to a capture. So make sure you check those opportunities. Okay, but I wanted to actually just take this pawn now. And yes, my king will have some difficulties to face. Now I noticed the problem I haven't noticed before, and this is why it's so important to think about your opponent's ideas. Well, that pawn on g2. Remember, my initial idea was to play bishop f3 afterwards and make sure nothing dangerous happens on this diagonal, and of course win the rook. But now that the bishop is gone, queen takes g2 becomes an idea again. On the other hand, it might be not such a big problem, because right now I can take on a8 with the check. My opponent has to take it back, yes. And now once I take on e2, he cannot take on g2 there. Well, good luck winning that extra pawn, but I have queen to c8, checkmate in one move. If our opponent does it, then he once again doesn't think about his opponent's idea. So you see how important that is in chess. If you're gonna change that in your mindset and always focus on that, that would help you improve so much, pretty much on the spot, just by shifting your perspective towards it. This video is brought to you by Chestnut. Chestnut is making amazing chessboards that allow you to play online from a real 3D board. They have high quality chessboards, nice looking chess pieces, so that you can enjoy and having fun playing it. Chestnut boards also have so many training functions that I absolutely love to use to my training, and it helps me to improve my chess every day. This is, for example, Chestnut Evo. I love to use it for my trainings, but they have so much to offer you depending on your preferences and your budget. And the best part is you can just use the promo code Journey to Grandmaster or click the link in the description to get a big discount on all of the Chestnut products. Okay, knight to b6. Yeah, the problem for my opponent is he cannot really castle, and without castles this king can never be in safety and this rook can never participate in the game. In my case, well, I do have this king which is also in the center, but at least I can bring my rook into the game, which I like a lot. For example, here I can just play rook to b1 attacking the knight, or rook to c1. In both cases, my rook is on the open file, and remember, rooks love open files. My opponent, though, wants to play knight to d5. In this case, I mean, either knight will go there, and then e7 square is going to be covered, c7 square is going to be covered, the knight would be protected, or it would be gone. So that is quite a nice thing for me. But okay, my task is to activate all of my pieces and see what kind of mistakes my opponent is gonna make. Okay, he plays knight to d5. That has a drawback as well, that this queen is no longer active. And I really want to play queen to c5 because that would be the most active position for my queen. And once again, castles is not possible, and I still protect my bishop on a3. I don't blunder it. Yes, he has this check, but first I have king e1 just to go back, and second I have knight c4 to block that. Yeah, that is also possible. I wanted just to play queen d6. I'm a little bit sad that d6 I actually wanted this square for my knight. But okay, you cannot have everything that you want. The queen on d6 is actually very good. It covers this a6 square, so there are no checks, and I'm blundering knight c3. I mean, that is what I'm talking about when I'm saying that you have to think about your opponent's ideas. Luckily for me, knight c3 is not a big deal. I mean, I'm still upset I haven't thought about it before making the move queen to d6, but because I have done everything right so far, I've activated all of my pieces. I haven't allowed my opponent to castle so that this king is still in danger. This tactical opportunity knight to c3 that seemingly is winning the rook doesn't work because I have created the checkmate threat beforehand. So yes, if you are doing everything correct in terms of the principles of chess, chances are tactics are gonna work for you, even if you're gonna miss something along the way, and you're always gonna miss something. But it's still great to check those opportunities because it's a check, the most active thing you can do. So actually, I should have done it. Okay, h5 doesn't really help in terms of this queen e7 threat, in terms of trying to castle, but helps in terms of maybe activating the rook, although that is still very slow. So maybe if knight to c3 is not a problem for me, I can actually even provoke it with the move e4. Because now after knight c3, I'm gonna just go back with my king, or even go forward, king to d3, and say, well, my king is actually an attacking piece, I want to grab your knight. At the same time, I'm creating this devastating threat of checkmate in one. What can you do about that? I actually don't see any moves at all. I mean, queen to d8, but that's such a passive move. If I play king to d3, then I'm gonna be able just to grab that knight absolutely for free. I like it. Let me play e4. Yes, it's like an aggressive move, and maybe you're gonna call it a fancy move, although it really helps. Like, I'm creating a threat. This is a defender for this threat, so I'm thinking, how can I get rid of it? And as long as this check or this check is not dangerous for my king, then I don't really care about it. Okay, knight to f4. That's actually smart. I thought this is not a move because I can just capture it, but now I noticed that my bishop is actually also hanging, and then yeah, that's an exchange which is quite a good one for my opponent. Yeah, now I maybe regret making that move first and not going back with my king. But on the other hand, I'm winning time. I'm making sure that this d5 square is no longer possible for my opponent. And now I can just escape with my king somewhere. I have to be smart with that. But I feel like f1 should be a good square because it doesn't allow any checks. Remember, a6 is covered by my queen, and my opponent goes back. Yes, it's a good thing for him that he covered that weakest e7 square, and now checkmate is not possible, at least for a few more moves. But on the other hand, every time your opponent goes back, it's actually not such a great thing for him. And you have now the opportunity to go forward, use all of your pieces. That cannot be bad for you. And also, this rook on h8, maybe it had dreams to go rook h6, rook g6, or rook f6. Now it's not possible because the knight is blocking that. For me, it's important to continue putting some pressure on my opponents, and to do that, I need to activate all of my pieces, or maybe open up the king even more. So I have here the idea to play d5, create a threat against this e6 pawn, or I have the idea to play knight c4, bringing yet another knight to the attack. So far, though, you have seen how important it is to always think, first of all, about your opponent's ideas, and second, to always start with the most active opportunities, moves forward, attacking moves, and only if it doesn't work, then think about something passive. Okay, well, knight c4, yes, it's an active move, it brings the knight forward, but I don't see an actual threat it creates, and I little bit don't like the fact that the e4 pawn is going to be a target, the queen can take it. Now, of course, I can continue that variation. Knight c4, queen takes, rook to b8 check, he has to take, queen takes, now into d7 is the only move. Maybe I have some checkmating ideas immediately. I better have, because otherwise I have sacrificed an exchange and a pawn for nothing. I have knight b6 check, but into c6, the only move, but I don't see a good continuation. I don't see a single check afterwards, and otherwise I might be completely lost. So knight c4, queen takes e4, rook b8 takes, queen takes, king to d7, queen d6 back, but king a8 back, and I once again don't see anything winning. So knight c4 is one of those fancy moves, risking everything, basically going all in, and if it doesn't work, then you spoil such a huge position. So why on earth should I do that? Don't want to go for it. Yeah, knight c4 would be a great thing if the queen wouldn't be here, because then I would have, after queen takes c4, this knight d6, basically knight d6. If I achieve that, that wins the game. Which means that maybe I should just move my queen away first, but now going back, I don't want that. Another idea is to play d5, like I mentioned, because I just want to take that pawn on e6. That would attack the knight. If he takes, I'm going to take it back, and then e-file is going to be opened, which is also great for me. Yeah, I like it. This is a move forward. This creates a threat, and I don't see any real drawbacks to this move. Imagine how cool it would be to play chess without ever having opening troubles again. What if I told you I could teach you all openings you will ever need in just 10 days? You get lifetime access to more than 110 pure value video tutorials, almost 100 practical tasks to apply your knowledge immediately into practice, 30 plus bonus videos to dive 10 times deeper, as well as private community where all questions you might ever have are answered daily. Get the $200 limited time discount with the link in the description and forget about all opening pain once and for all. I still have everything protected. Yes, my opponent tries to close the position, which is a normal desire, like not to allow me to open up that e-file, for example, and bring my rook there. But the drawback of this move is that his queen now has much less activity, and now my knight to c4 move, which I wanted to make before, now has absolutely zero drawbacks. He doesn't have any active moves, and otherwise I'm just bringing yet another piece into the attack, which is always great. Now after queen c8, I'm so happy to play queen b4 back. Unless I have something even better, I don't see it. So I want to bring my queen away so that d6 square is available for my knight, and in this case it's even a royal fork threat, so my opponent absolutely has to do something about it. He plays queen to d8, which is another very passive move, and the move which is basically losing the game. But why does all of that happen? Well, notice that all of my pieces are active, my king is in safety, and my opponent's pieces are not active at all. The king is not in safety, this rook on h8 is not participating in the game at all. So this is how you win at chess. Now let's try to win the game, because it's one thing to get a good position, another thing is to win the winning position. People are even saying this is the most difficult part in chess. So we always start with checks, and here we have this knight to d6 check that we wanted to make before. This is a very active move. This knight is becoming more and more dangerous, and now we just think, okay, what kind of opportunities we have here? Knight to b7 is a check from those pieces, and at the same time attacking the queen. What the queen can do, the only way to save it is to play queen e7, and then I wanted just to play queen to a4 or queen to b3 and win the queen. That is why I'm making the move a little bit faster, because there is nothing our opponent can do. Knight c5 would be a way to block this attack from the bishop, but unfortunately for him, I do have two attackers for the c5 square, and he only has one defender. Okay, doesn't want to save the queen. And I can even start with the check first here. Yeah, let me do that, queen a8. To make sure that he plays knight to e8, another passive move. You always want to go forward and make your opponent go back. Now it's time for me to take. Yeah, not. King takes. Okay. Then I can play queen to d8 check. Notice that it doesn't matter what the position is, whether I have a lot of material advantage or it's a normal position, I always want to create as many threats as possible, because that would make my opponent's life more difficult, and that is my goal in chess. Then it's the likelihood that he's gonna make mistakes is much higher, and the likelihood that I'm gonna make mistakes is lower, because, well, I create those problems that he has to deal with. Okay, now I play d7, and I'm about to create a new queen. 8. Let me promote a new queen. Goes to h7. I cannot actually save both of the queens, because that's here. I'm not sure how to call it, a pin, a fork. Two of my queens are standing on the way of this rook, but I can just take on f7. That would be good enough. Back to the question of exchanging your pieces. If you have more material on the board, the more pieces you exchange, the simpler it gets for you to convert that advantage. h3, my opponent finally decides to do something active in the game. The problem is it's way too late for it. And I'm gonna play rook to b7 for the instructive purposes, because I want to include every single piece I have on the board in the attack. Takes on g2. I don't want to take it, because that would allow some checks for my opponent, so I'm gonna just play into g1 and block that pawn. Now there is nothing you can do. Yeah, you can play king h6. I don't know. I guess it makes sense to play knight d6. First of all, we include yet another piece into the attack before going all in into it. And second, that would be very helpful in terms of not allowing this king to escape. Yeah, I would even play queen to f5, just to make sure it doesn't go away. To h6, and now rook takes g7. You have those extra pieces so that you use it, not just be happy about the fact that you have. And now rook h7. I hope this video was useful for you. If, however, it's too advanced, no worries. Here I'm playing against 1500 rated opponent and explain you all of the ideas, everything you have to know to beat everybody around at this level, so definitely take a look at that video.